We're going to be talking tonight about this word that God has given me specifically for you guys. And I'm really excited about it because I know that He speaks. Raise your hand if you believe God speaks. And you know, what's shocking to me is how quickly He will speak to us if we just ask Him just a sincere question. Lord, with a sincere heart to know. You know, sometimes like I've got these two kids over here, and I remember specifically whenever I was a kid, you know, you can ask a question, you can ask a rhetorical question, you can ask a sarcastic question, you can ask a question not really seeking an answer, you can ask a question, you know, just trying to get validated in what you already believe, right? You're not actually asking for it. So I think God can kind of tell, you know, when you get the snarkiness or whatever, when He actually gets somebody who actually says, God, I really, really, really want to know. Sounds like a Spice Girls song lyric or something. Do you really? Oh, no, don't you dare. I'm not going to start summing out with Spice Girls. Sorry about that, guys. Scratch that memory from your consciousness. Ow, that's a bad start, man. So the Lord, not impersonating Spice Girls, like, do you really want to know? And so I said, yeah, I actually do want to know, because I'm not looking to waste your time, not looking to waste my time. Like, we got stuff to do. And I'm like, wow, I actually believe, Lord, that you have something to say. And He said this to me about you, and I'm speaking to you as a generation. I'm not, how many of you guys are in your 20s? Raise your hand. How many of you guys are, okay, everyone's in your 20s. Look at that, we did good. He said of your generation, He said, you're the missing piece. Yay, you're important. You are. You're the missing piece. Now, what I mean by missing piece is we're going to get into this story. Again, trying to be the cool pastor, so I'm using the Message tonight. And I guess there's newer, cooler translations, but that's my understanding of cool translation is the Message. I got for anyone who cares, I got my NKJV here, which I normally preach out of, but we're going the Message tonight. And this is the story of it was a prophet, and this prophet who was a man who could hear God and speak for God, and this is the Old Testament, so there was no, Holy Spirit filling people. It was these people, and God's Spirit was on them, and those were the guys that would speak for God. And so you had this prophet, and then you had the king prophet, his name was Elisha. He was among these student prophets, and this one guy, and so what they said is, you can see that this place we're living is way too cramped. We've got no elbow room. Give us permission to go down to Jordan, and where each of us will get a log, and we'll build a roomier place. So that's a good idea. Now, what I want to talk to you about here is this idea. There's a transference of location. The transference of location goes from a town called Gilgal to a place called Jordan. Gilgal means circle of stones, and Jordan means flowing down. So what I want to lay out for you guys as we get started is the idea that God wants to free you from the limitations of your milestones. Rocks or stones in the Bible were often used to commemorate an experience. So whenever you had a good experience, you would take a rock and you would mark it and you would say, this is what God did. This is what I experienced. So essentially what you would do is you would create a rock, and that would be your experience or your memory. Now, I'm convinced that we not only in our lives create rocks for the good experiences in our lives, but I'm convinced that we also make these stones to commemorate the bad experiences in our lives. And so what Gilgal means, which is where they were, which is where they were getting cramped, it's where they were in this space and they were confined and they weren't able to move beyond. They had literally created this circle of stones and they found themselves where they couldn't move. So the problem is that if you have, and as you age, you'll get experiences that will be good. Getting married, having kids, getting your better job, getting a house, all of these things. The problem is that as you age, you have a tendency to remember the good old days. Or you have a tendency to remember the pain and the problems and the sufferings, and you rehash them, and you go at rock by rock by rock. Maybe a challenge comes in your life, and then you just rehearse all of the reasons why you can't succeed or why it's not going to work out, why it's okay to fail because of this and because of that, because my mom this, because my dad that, because of this. Or on the flip side, well, maybe I don't have to walk in humility. Maybe I don't need to learn. Maybe God's trying to take you in a different direction. And you say, well, I'm good at this. This is what I know. This is what I'm familiar with. I've got these good experiences and I'm done. And so what he does is he takes these prophets from Gilgal, the circle of stones, and he says, I want to take you to Jordan, which is the place of flowing down. It's the place of having downward momentum. It's a place of having acceleration. And that's what God wants for you. He doesn't want you to be stuck in this circle. And again, there was this old illustration of an elephant as a baby, and they tied the elephant to this stake. And the baby elephant was a strong animal, but he wasn't strong enough to pull out of that stake. But the problem was that baby elephant, he would circle around in that little perfect radius of that circle. He got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and he got stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. But he looked at that stake in the ground and he said, I can't pull that stake out. And so I can't go beyond this. Even though he could, because he believed that, he formed a stronghold in his mind. He formed a circle of stones, and he said, well, that's as far as I can go there. That's as far as I can go there. That's as far as I can go in my career. That's as far as I can go in my relationship. That's as far as I can go with God. And he stopped. Even though he could go further, he stopped because he said, I can't go further. So he was ultimately his own worst enemy, right? And those are things called strongholds. So we look here further in verse 4, and he says, they came to the Jordan, and they started chopping down these trees. Now, I did landscaping, and that's man's work, right? Now, you operate heavy equipment. I'm imagining they didn't have any gloves to protect. They probably had some serious calluses. These are real men of God. It's funny you hear things about Jesus. He was a carpenter, which, by the way, carpenters in that day didn't just work with wood. They also worked with stone. So Jesus was a man's man, right? He was strong. He was powerful. He had calluses on his hands. This guy right here has the strongest grip I've ever met of anybody. And I played college baseball with some pretty strong dudes. It's because of the labor you do every day. He was well practiced in having that strong grip. So I'm sure these guys had that. They were chopping these trees down. And he says, as one of them was felling a timber, his axe head flew off and he sank into the river. Oh no, master, he cried out, and it was borrowed. So this is really my question for you tonight. And I want to remind you about the word I felt like God told me to tell you, that you are the missing piece. Are you someone who at one point had a clear purpose, but somewhere got lost, buried, and forgotten? You see, this axe head knows his purpose. This axe head knows exactly what he's trying to do. He's like, tree, cut, done. I know what I'm going to do today, tomorrow, and forever. He's got a vision. He's got a mission. He's got a purpose. He's not confused. If anyone was to see him, well, who are you? What are you all about? He's like, well, I'm an axe head. That's what I do. I chop down trees. But in this case, the axe head loses his position. Something happens. And I want to tell you that there will be times in your life that the thing you got trained for, prepared for, expected, something's going to happen, and all of a sudden the map's going to go out and you're going to feel lost. You're going to have an opportunity to feel buried. You're going to have an opportunity to be forgotten. But I want to make something, and this is really a warning for you, but it's a loving warning. Because if you fall into this, then you go, as they say, don't be bitter, be better. You have an opportunity to become bitter if you do this. So don't mistake when God puts you into a resting time that He's retiring you. There may come a time in your life when God's using you, but then He might say, you know what, it's time for you to step aside. It's time for you to take a Sabbath. It's time for you to step out of that thing that maybe is becoming more important to you than God. Maybe it's becoming more important to you than having faith in God, because you don't need to have faith in God because you already know the routine. Do not confuse being set apart, which is really good. That's sanctified. That means God has a plan for you. He's going to take you. He's going to prepare you. He maybe needs to put you aside, put you apart for a little bit. Don't confuse that for being set aside, being forgotten, being ignored, being the last one chosen. Anyone been the last one chosen? I mean, I have been. So don't mistake that. And again, for ministry, this is important. And this is really in anything in your calling. You cannot put yourself into your calling. No matter how much you strive and struggle and try to make it happen, you can't do that. God has to open the door. God has to be the one to give you favor. He's got to be the one, if He speaks to you a promise, then you believe that promise and then you trust Him in that. But the warning is that you can be the one to take yourself out of your calling. The Bible is very clear that the callings of God are without repentance. But there is a warning that we will not have God take it away from us, but we'll walk away from it. So just be very careful that we consider our calling. And again, one more warning here. You can miss a divine appointment, not because God cancels it, but because you choose to sleep in. So God will call you to things. And oftentimes He'll call you to things that are outside your comfort zone, what you're not trained for, what you're not prepared for, to see if you can walk by faith. But if we're not listening, we may miss a divine appointment that He has for us because we're basically checked out. So we're going to continue in 2 Kings. This holy man, Elisha, he says, "Where did it sink?" And the man came and he showed him the place. Very, very important point I have for you guys tonight. When God asks where something is, or for that matter, where someone is, it's not because He can't find it. He's not asking because He sincerely wants to know where it is. He's not lost. Why does God ask where something is? In Genesis, He said, "Adam, where are you?" He's asking us, where are you? Why? He's essentially using the Socratic method. He's using questions to generate learning. Do you know where you are? Do you know where you are? Are you aware of it? Haggai says, consider your ways. Sometimes we get so caught up in the motions of our life. We get caught up in the routine. I often say that we don't live by plans, we live by patterns. We're living by the patterns of our life. And so we might end up in a spot and we don't even know where we are. So all of a sudden we have to have God ask us a question. Hey, where are you? Hey, where is that thing? Oh, you mean you want me to actually pay attention? You know, it's funny, we're texting and things. Our selective attention is amazing where we don't pay attention. We're just locked in on one thing and God's talking. I was going to show you guys a video where the basketball is getting passed between these guys wearing black shirts and then there's white shirts going through and you're supposed to be paying attention to the black shirt. I'm sorry, you're supposed to be paying attention to the white shirts. And then this gorilla walks across the screen and beats his chest, but because he's got black as the fur, you don't notice him. Your selective attention is there. So you guys are so focused maybe on that thing. Again, this axe head knows his job. He knows his role. He knows what he's going to be. He knows what tomorrow is. And so he's so locked in, maybe God's coming to him saying, hey, I want to do something else with you, but he's distracted. So he's like, hey, axe head, where are you? So we're going to go on here, and he says that Elisha cuts off a branch. He tosses it in at that spot. The axe head floats up. And then he says, grab it. The man reached out and he took it. Now I want to get into a couple of things here about the nature of God. So the first commandment is don't have other gods before God. Man does worship created things because innately he knows that man has dominion over that. Man desires to worship a God that he can overthrow should he choose. I'm saying this because in this story of an axe head floating to the surface, God is saying, I have dominion over natural laws. God has dominion over what is natural. Gravity says that that axe head should not come up, but somehow it comes up. And so in Israel, God is supposed to be their king. And Israel says, no, we want a king. We want a man. Why do they want a man and not God? Because they know they can't overthrow God. But they know that if they don't like the king, in this case Saul, they could overthrow him. In the same way, man innately has understanding of dominion. We have dominion over the birds of the sea, the plant of the air. But there's a lie in society that, man is actually supposed to serve nature and not the other way around. So here's a really powerful idea. If, again, getting back to that question we mentioned in the beginning of the message, you may feel lost, you may feel buried, you may feel forgotten. It does not matter where you got lost. What matters is where you get lifted. And in this story, we have an axe head, and it doesn't matter where the axe head fell. What matters is that God was going to raise up that axe head. And I've got this wild theory. And again, Isaiah 41:10 talks about that the Lord is the one who holds us up in his right hand. I got this amazing thought that an angel of the Lord put his hand down there in that river and lifted it up. That's my theory. Otherwise, it's just, magnetism or something like that. When you are buried in the mud, the harder you fight, the deeper you sink. Solomon, my 4-year-old, and I were playing at the lake, and he was in his little life jacket, and they were going across the shoreline, and all of a sudden I heard him screaming. He had fire ants all over his legs. So I started to run as fast as I could. Or was that you? Okay, that was Solomon. I was just trying to picture Solomon actually swimming. Yeah, I knew where it was. So Solomon was the one who was there, and he had all these ant bites, and so I grabbed him real quick, and I was running as fast as I could, and all of a sudden I found out the power of mud, and I was running, but I was sinking my feet in real deep, and the harder I pulled, the more I got stuck in it, and I finally got out as I learned my lesson. But the key here is this, is that if you find yourself ever lost, buried in that mud, the harder you fight to get out, the deeper you're going to sink. So what's the answer? How do you get out of it? You can only float when you stop struggling and you start surrender. So when you fall, when you get lost, you can fight and struggle all you want to, but the key here, guys, is you've got to learn to surrender. Have you ever tried to do a back float and you start freaking out? I was teaching my sons how to swim. It's like, come on, man, trust me, just relax. How many of us struggle with just relaxing when we feel it's time to panic? What's important? You got to surrender. When we are lost, buried, and forgotten, this is important. This is the core of the message here. It's important to remember that the only thing that finds us, recovers us, and remembers us in this story is a piece of wood. Anybody know where I'm going with this? There's a piece of wood, because in this story, he threw a piece of wood into the water and the thing rose. Galatians 3, Christ redeemed us from that self-defeating cursed life by absorbing it completely into himself. Do you remember the scripture that says, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree? That is what happened when Jesus was nailed to the cross. He became a curse and at the same time dissolved the curse. Because of the tree, because of this piece of wood, the curse is broken. And the piece of wood in this story is what caused that axe head to float up. So if you're ever lost, if you're ever buried, if you're ever forgotten, the only answer for you is a piece of wood. It's the cross of Jesus Christ. Amen? See, these trees, and I didn't tell you this, but the trees that they cut down was designed to make a house, make a meeting place for the prophets. It was designed, these trees that they were cutting down were designed to be a place where they would hear God, where they would listen to God's voice. But the Bible's clear that it's not just about hearing God's voice. The tree cut for Jesus Christ represented not just hearing his voice, but obeying his voice. And that's a problem we have as Christians, is that we come to church and we hear his word, but we don't do his word. So it's important for us to realize that we must hear God's word, but we must follow that up with corresponding action. Amen? Jesus was cursed by a death on a tree so that you could be blessed by his life in eternity. I want you to understand this. The curse that was on your life, the curse of sin, through the blood of Jesus is broken forever. Sin does not have to be a problem in our lives because of the blood of Jesus. This does not mean that we do not have sin. It does not mean that sin is not revealed in our life, but it means that when it is, by the confession of that sin and an application of the blood, that sin is removed and it has no effect on our life. Every day, my family is experiencing some level of revelation, of conviction, of exposure, and freedom. Sins that have bound us for years, when we develop the revelation that it's been nailed on the cross and paid for, and the curse of that sin has been paid for, I can walk and receive that. But if I admit it, if I surrender, when I'm buried under sin and lost under sin, feel forgotten by God, all I have to do is surrender, submit, and guess what happens? I float, and then He takes hold of me. Now, this may be a harsh statement, but I do believe it. No man or woman can truly be saved if they don't recognize their need for salvation. How can you truly be saved if you don't understand what you're saved from? I don't believe you can just pray a prayer and not mean it. I don't believe you can just pray a prayer and it not mean anything to you. I think you have to understand what you're saved from. So my question today is, do you know what you've been saved from? I don't believe any man or woman can have true peace with God unless they recognize the purpose of Jesus' death on the cross. Do you know why He died? Not just that He died, but do you know why He died? And that's important.